Thanks. Okay, but I think I can stay here. So, thanks for your passion. I'd love to start simply showing some diagram that is a way to underline what we started to discuss together. So how the processes of urbanization and digitalization together were at the origins of all the trends related with global heating. But in specific, there is a very strong contradiction that we could observe in a contemporary condition of the planet. On one side is the explosion of the urban environment all over the world. On the other side is the loss of forest, so the processes of deforestation. Why this contradiction is so crucial, is so important nowadays? Because if we try to observe the presence of city in the planet, I mean all the different kind of cities, so small, middle-sized cities, metropolitan environment, megalopolis, and we could imagine to concentrate all these cities in one part of the planet, let's say Europe, we will not cover more than 3% of the surface of the major lands. But this 3%, which is continuously growing, and what is very important is to see where it grows. It grows in India, South Asia, it grows in China, it grows in South America and in Africa. And this, let's say, different scenario of urban evolution, it's, if you want to confirm that one of the major issues that we will have in the future is about poverty. So nowadays, 30% of the urban population live in slum, in informal settlement, in favelas, in barracks. And this phenomenon is going to grow because we know that climate change will produce and will in a certain way accelerate the process of migration related to desertification, for instance. We are expected 250 million of refugees and refugees connected with the process of desertification in 2050. So just to go back to urban Pangea, these cities, this urban Pangea, which is growing in some part of the world, not in Europe, for instance, which is causing also in the next year a very strong issue related with poverty. Well, this urban Pangea is consuming the 70% of the natural resources and is producing 75% of the CO2 present in the atmosphere of our planet. So that's something that we cannot forget. At the same time, if you try to go back to forests are basically composed by something like 3 trillions of trees all over the world. And we could concentrate all the woodland, the forest, we will not cover more than the 30%. Just see what could happen if we put it between Asia and Europe. And what forest does, is extremely important and let's say crucial for our survival as a species. For instance, they absorb the 30% of that CO2. They absorb the 70% of CO2, they transform CO2 in oxygen. That's the reason why the processes of deforestation, forest loss, is now more and more a very, very, very serious issue. So we cannot simply observe this process at a distance. We have to enter in the detail in trying to understand what we could do. And there are a lot of studies all over the world, but I'm trying to study how it's possible to enlarge the surface occupied by forest for the simple reason that at the very moment, the unique tool we have to absorb CO2, which is a different way, it's not about how we can avoid to produce CO2. No, it's to absorb the existence CO2 are trees, plants, forest, woodlands. So in a certain way, all what will be possible to do in order to enlarge the surface occupied by forest in the world, like this idea to have 0.2 9 billion of new hectares of canopy cover. That means space covered in the world, which is about like 1 more trillion of trees. It's something that could help us to cut drastically the presence of CO2 in the atmosphere of the planet. So it's one of the most, let's say, efficient, I think, at a certain point of view, economic and democratic way to try to tackle climate change. If this is true, the point is, could we do this without involving cities that are, on the other side, a process and a condition that is continuous growing in the different parts of the planet? My answer is no. It's impossible to imagine to do something of serious to improve the quality of life, the quality of the atmosphere, let's say the condition of global heating in the world without involving cities. So if you want, just to sum up, the issue that we all have to discuss is how we can make cities not simply the origin of climate change, because they are the origin, not simply the victim, because thanks to the phenomenon of flooding, with many of the the biggest coastal metropolitan environment, thanks to Miami, New Orleans for sure, but also Shanghai, that are seriously now trying to deal with the risk of flooding. So how we can make city protagonists of a large campaign to tackle climate change? And this is basically what we try to do, what we have to do. And when I say we, I'm talking about the fact that we are architects for sure. That's a building that we built in Milano, and we have promoted the first worldwide forum on urban forest last year in Mantua, together with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. We have gathered 90 countries, and that was one of the results. So a list of 7, 8 issues that should become part of the public policies agenda all over the world, the main important urban environment. So what I'm going to do now, in 10 minutes, is simply to show what this means in a different part of our activity, knowing that SF3, as you were saying, is improving drastically the quality of life. So there are cities that are already at the avant-garde of this campaign to tackle climate change, using forest, using wood, using plants, using green. That's New York, where we have just finished to plant 1 million of trees in Manhattan. Melbourne is, well, probably one of the most advanced situation where it's not simply about planting trees, but also creating the green corridors that are crossing the city. This is London. Paris was invested in green roofs in the last 5, 6 years. More than 20% of the public green roofs in Paris are now green and sometimes used for local agriculture, local farmers. But Vancouver, Canada, who is another, was worker, and San Francisco, who started many years ago to monitorize all the trees that are present in the city, asking the citizen to adopt a tree. So that app is now working so well also for the new trees that are going to be planted. In Beijing has changed the condition of the air, not simply decentralizing the factories, but also introducing new green surfaces and all around creating an orbital park. And that's Milano. But as you will see in a minute, I think it's coming to become one of the most interesting part of this process of forestation. But he's our hero, you know him. He has just received the Nobel Award. I think he was demonstrating that it's possible to do altogether something absolutely strong when you talk about forest and forestry. He was planting 300 million of trees in 1 day in Ethiopia. And it's part of the process. This is the same thing happening in other parts of the world. This is the mayor of Tirana. This is the mayor of London. This is the mayor of Paris. So that's something that we have to learn to do immediately. Just go back to what we do as architects. We do 4 things. The first is to imagine to introduce, how you could say, graft. Graft is a botanic word. Let's say single, very strong ecosystem that can improve the quality of environment in different parts of the city. This is something which is not new. Let's look at 14th century. And this is, as you can see in a minute, the construction of the first vertical forest in Milano. We are in 2010, and that video is done by the BBC, by David Attenborough. David came with his team trying to follow the construction of our project, and we were, well, extremely excited by his presence, and we asked him, why are you coming? And he said, I'm interested not simply to see how you can, let me say, multiply the number of trees in a single building, but we're interested to see how this new ecosystem could improve the cohabitation with other living species in a city, not simply humans, but birds, for instance, how it could become a model for a different kind of cohabitation between human and other living species. This is more or less a vertical forest in these last weeks. So this building is hosting, these two buildings are hosting 21,000 plants. So 21,000 plants means 800 trees, exactly 4,500 shrubs, and basically 15,000 plants of different nature, which are the equivalent of 3 hectares of a real forest, but in a surface of 2,000 square meters. This is what makes vertical forestation important nowadays, that you can concentrate an amazing amount of green environment, of green subject, of green individuals in such a small urban surface, sometimes in the center of a very dense and polluted city. So it's something that is possible to do, and the Milano prototype, we consider this as an experiment, is there. You can come, you can see, you can text, and also we all are studying the advantages and disadvantages of this project, or the mistake we have done. We are trying to improve day by day what we have done, and it's very important for us to do a list of performances and to check this. So we are now involved in many other parts of the world to realize buildings that have this amazing quantity of plants, of trees, not as ornamental, not as a decorative presence, but as a component, basic component of our idea of a new generation of architectures who has to deal with the problem of climate change. We are working a lot in order to reduce the cost of construction and the cost of maintenance, as we're going to see. And this is some of the example of what we're going to do. This is Lausanne. Lausanne is a residential building where we are imagining to change also the construction using loggias and a simple balcony. This is Utrecht. Utrecht is going to construction, G&S Construction Developer Real Estate, which is realizing this amazing project, and we won the competition together. We are very happy of that. This project is very complex because it has a commercial basement, then offices, then residential. So it's a mixed-use building with an amazing number of plants. So, and this is Eindhoven, where we were just yesterday to visit the construction site. So this is in construction with Trudeau. Real estate company, we call this Trudeau Vertical Forest, but what makes this building very interesting and for me exciting is that it's a social housing building with a very low cost in construction, and so thanks to the use of prefabrication and thanks to what we have learned from the experience of the Milan Vertical Forest, we are now in condition to imagine a high-rise, green, smart building, affordable for everybody, which is the future. It's part of the future. And that's something that for sure many, many other architects will do in the future, using and also, if you want, testing what we have done. That's a construction site in Eindhoven. And this is a nursery, because when we construct a building like that, you have always a nursery, let's say a botanic nursery, where you can go and see your living facade. So, and then the relation between these two spaces is like the mother and the father of the project. That's Paris. What we like of the project in Paris is that it will be completely built in wood. Also, the structure of the building will be in wood, and this is, well, great. I was just saying, I think part of what you have to do in the future. This is Beijing, China, where we have in construction 2 towers of a real vertical forest. And I think it will be very important to show how it would be possible also in this extremely dynamic and delicate part of our planet, we can introduce building like this one. That's Manhattan, and I show this for one reason, that probably is one of the easier and more clear way to talk about the efficiency of a vertical forest. So if we consider that in Central Park we have basically not more than 20,000 plants, well, let's imagine that building something like 25 vertical forests in around Central Park, or less but higher building around Central Park, we could simply double the number of trees existent in Central Park all around New York. So that's a way Ponting would show the possibility that has this building to drastically change the capacity of a city to host greener environment, has green generator, and has capacity to absorb CO2, to absorb the dust of urban pollution, to reduce the consumption of energy, to, well, for sure, absorb and the dust of pollution, but also to create a microclimate condition that helps to don't use the conditioned air in summertime, to improve the biodiversity of living species, to reduce the cost of healthy. You know that it's in discussion in the European Commission in this day, the possibility that the processes and the project of urban forestry could become part of the cost for healthy, for the public health in Europe. That's another project we're developing in India, which is like a green grid wall. It's still public housing, and this is other project at a different scale. This is Antwerp, where we are imagining to realize a small building which has a character of, let's say, a huge green roofs and terraces and balcony in different parts of the settlement. And again, just to show you that it's possible to imagine to realize building like this one in different parts of the world. This is Cairo, New Cairo, in a very complicated condition in terms of microclimate because we are in the desert. We are going to start with building these 3 green cubes, hoping that will become part of a larger project which will change the character of Cairo. And we have working on this idea to make Cairo greener, introducing the grass, but also imagining to realize a kind of orbital forest all around the city and other projects. So the second issue is about demineralization. So it's not simply introducing graft, but how we can do to demineralize the urban surfaces, to introduce greener surfaces, to make city greener, in few words. And I show you some examples. This is Tirana, Albania. We've done the master plan. Tirana was a gray and, let's say, completely done by concrete and asphalt seating. We have proposed a totally drastic change, an orbital forest all around the city and many green corridors inside the city. And the mayor and, well, honestly, majority of politicians in Tirana has very well understood that the amazing opportunity of this change. And now Tirana has planted in 2 years 200,000 new trees all around and inside the city. And together with this idea of green, we have also introduced another concept, which is public schools. Public schools could become the epicenter of public life, but we need schools that are open 24 hours a day, 7 hours a week, all the day of the year. So public schools have epicenters, together with forest, could become an amazing component of drastic change in our urban environment. And this is Milano. Milano, as we say, we have just launched with the mayor of Milano the idea to plant 3 million of trees in the future. And this project has many possible declinations. One is reuse of the abandoned industrial, rail yards. Is a system which we want to transform in a kind of new green river. At the same time, we are extremely interested to connect this new linear system, this new ring, with a system of public mobility and with the capacity, thanks to geothermal energy, to use the water we stay in the underground to reduce the consumption of energy. So the numbers are very important, and these are some of the scenario of the evolution of this project in Milano, who will introduce new natural environment inside one of the most part of the most dense and polluted part of the city, creating a landscape that at the moment doesn't exist. Milano is also a place where we have our office. With this, our last project is the idea to do a football stadium for Milano San Siro. You know that is Milano, like Amsterdam. It's one of the worldwide chapter of football, but this stadium will be realized also in this case with a forest around, with a vertical forest. So this is simply a way to go back to the fact that we have to do our best to make our cities greener and to make our architecture greener from the beginning. Then this is another project we are doing in Genoa. You know well what's happened. Basically 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago in Genoa, with the collapse of the bridge, was not simply was not simply the Genoa Bridge. That was a bridge connecting Italy with France. It was a symbol of Italian modernity. Well, we have been asked, we won the competition to design the space below the bridge that is going to be designed and built by Renzo Piano, who is a very famous worldwide architect. We started to do it together with a Dutch landscape designer, Petra Blaise, and his office called Inside Outside, which is based in Amsterdam. And it's very interesting how we tried to, let's say, accept the effect of this collapse. This is the bridge just before the collapse. This is the bridge just after. And this is what we propose. We propose to do a ring on steel, a red ring, that will connect the different landscapes that are now below the bridge, and at the same time to work with forests, to work with green, to work with plants. So this connection is a public path, walkable, also using with bikes. But what's happening below the bridge is basically related with a park, the idea of a new park that will put together different parts of this settlement. So it has to do with building, it has to do with infrastructure, but it has to do with also with this amazing new biodiverse condition of plants around. And that's another point which is very important, is about energy. We work with Transolar, which is a German agency, and they are able to show how it's possible to collect renewable energy from the sun and from the wind, and to use hydrogen or methane to stock. So it's a technique from power to gas that will be used in that space. Third part, and I go very fast, it's when it happens in some parts of the world that we have to think to realize new cities, because the process of migration are so strong that you cannot avoid to imagine new cities. That's China. This is a forest city in China, in Lizhu, 30,000 people. All the buildings, doesn't matter the function and the dimension, are covered by plants. That's Mexico, Cancun, nearby Cancun. This is a smart forest city for 130,000 inhabitants. And this is something that we are observing with a lot of attention. It's really something that could change the future of a green and smart city all over the world. As you see, you will have also a ring which at the same time related with energy and related with food and agricultural alimentation. That's Cairo, and it's a forest city in the new Cairo, so in the desert, which has some character of the one you have seen before. And this is another small green and smart city in the desert, which has the same ring, as you can see, which can, in a way, feed the city, not only from an energetical point of view. Just to conclude, I told you I was in New York for the Forum on Climate Change, and what we were discussing was still something connected with cities. So you know that in 2007, the African Union countries decided to start to realize 15 kilometers large, 8,000 kilometers long, green barrier to stop the extension of the Sahara Desert in the Sahel. And this is something that you can start to see from the satellite images. So what we were discussing in New York together with FAO, together with C40, and many of the representatives of this country, is how we could imagine to involve city. So to transform city, since their nature of obstacles of this green corridor, in a protagonist of a different condition. And the FAO project is ambitious, is to connect the Great Green Wall, the African Great Green Wall, with the Chinese Great Green Wall, which is going to become a barrier to stop the extension of the Gobi Desert in China. So we were part of that, and the issue was really how we could make cities protagonists, how we could make city generator of green environment. And this is Richard Weller. He's a researcher and teacher who works at the Penn University, who's trying to transform this vision in a kind of idea of a world park that putting together protected environment, forest, and, if possible, greener cities. And that's some of the possible way to imagine the future of the part of the world, imagine process of forestation. One is also connected with Southern Europe, but why not? It could happen also in Northern Europe and Central Europe. And you see something that we're now going in Italy, involving the 14 metropolitan environments as greener generators. So greener cities that become not simply obstacles, but nodes of this new green corridor that in this case is crossing Spain, France, Italy from north to south, and then it goes direction of Albany and Greece. So basically, this is, again, at a different scale, a way to go back to this necessity to work on cities as green generator. And that's the reason I'm very happy to invite you in Milano, 21, 22nd of November, where we have a forum on urban forestry, and it will be easier to discuss and to exchange best practices and good policies. Thank you so much for your attention.